Thank you. It's interesting. This film, which is a Belgian co-production, has never played in Belgium before. It played in France. In fact, it was a French, Tunisian, Belgian production, and the French and the Tunisian obviously were able to release it, sort of. Tunis was severely censored. But in France, in Paris, it was apparently quite successful. But in Belgium, when the Belgian producer, who Claude told you about, when they wanted to import the film, because they'd seen the receipts in Paris, they thought, well, this film's going to work. When they tried to import the film to Belgium, the negative was seized and destroyed, in fact. And in fact, when we started working on this movie, there was no negative. There's 2 prints in the Cinematheque, both of which were severely damaged. Really bad. Fortunately, we were able to get, through the help of a friend of mine down there, Daniel Bird, we were able to find a company that was able to do, I think they did really great work. I'm not saying the film looks perfect, but if you could have seen what it looked like before, you'd realise that they kind of work miracles. I'll tell you a little bit about the background to the film, the people who made it. There was basically 2 young guys who grew up together in Tunisia and met each other at school. One of them was of French extraction. Tunisia was had been a French protectorate, and I think it became independent, I think, in something like 1956. So when those 2 guys first met at school, would have been in the early 60s. And there was a kind of I think the kind of post-revolutionary or post-colonial feeling in the country was that, we're free to do what we want to do. We can pursue different areas of self-expression and art and so on. And I have to say I was very surprised when I first saw the film, that it doesn't seem like the kind of film you would expect to come from a North African country. It's got naked scenes in it, it's got violence in it, it's got politics in it and stuff. And it was really interesting talking to the 2 directors, exactly how they managed to get this done. And it was also interesting that they seemed surprised that I was surprised. They said, we used to see all the French films, Godard and whatever, would play in Tunisia. They were kind of aware of what's happening on the world cinema stage. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I've been talking today. When they decided to make a film, it was 1968. They were both in Paris at the time, living just around the corner from the Sorbonne. So you can imagine, it was just after May 68, which you're all far too young to have been there, but you'll all know what that was, okay? So revolutionary kind of zeal was in the air, as it had been in Tunisia. And they didn't have very much to do, so they thought, the way that you do when you're young, hey, let's make a movie, okay? And they had no money, no connections, nothing at all. But they decided that they would make a Western, because they thought, they both liked Westerns. They thought they're commercial, we can find money to make a Western. One of the friends that they were sharing the flat with was a dedicated Marxist, and he would lecture them about, bourgeois culture and all the rest of it, and that Westerns, you're not solving any problems by making Western. So they kicked it around, and they came up with the film that you're going to see here, which is kind of, I don't know, how you describe it really. It's a film of essentially 2 parts, because there were 2 directors, as I say, one of French extraction. Actually, his father, I think, was Italian, and the other was Arabic. Férid, the other director. And I think when you watch them, they're both very different as people. Claude, the French guy, is more into classical music, sort of art, high art and stuff. And Férid is very much into rock and roll, fantastic literature like H.P. Lovecraft, who's a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and still is. So when they started to work on a film script, you can imagine that those two kinds of sides of it, one very into classical music, opera and so on, and the other into fantastic stuff, weird movies. It's kind of, there's a tension there, and I think you'll see that in the movie. And I would say, and I think the two directors would say this, that the movie when it starts, it takes a while. I mean, it's only a short film; it's 76 minutes, I think. It takes a while to get into its stride, because you imagine there's two guys with no money, really very little money, and no experience of making movies, and suddenly they find themselves with camera actors and the location. I think you feel there's a sense of them feeling their way. The film is shot in Tunisia, and so which obviously is a hot country, a lot of sun. The early scenes are very much interior. When they eventually go outside into the sun, the bright Tunisian sun, then the film really comes to life, and I think you'll see that when you watch the movie. Just a word about the cast, because obviously it was quite difficult to find people, women in particular, there's three main female roles in the film, who were prepared to take part in that kind of film. In Tunisia it was impossible. They were in Paris, so they started to ask around if anybody knew anyone who was into making weird movies. And one of the people that they spoke to was Jean Rollin. I guess most of you will know who he was. And he helped them a lot in all kinds of different ways. He recommended an actress called Ursula Pauli, who, if you've seen, I think the Ville de Vampire, the Ryan film The Ville de Vampire, she's in that. You'll recognise her in this film if you've seen some of his stuff. The rest of the cast, there was a magazine called, I think, Cinémonde. Cinémonde? I don't know if it exists any longer. They used to have, this was back in the 60s or early 70s, they used to have a column at the back, some adverts, asking for people offering to be in a movie. Hey, we want to be in a movie. So they put an ad in this back of Cinémonde saying actresses wanted for film to be shot in Tunisia or whatever. And they got a lot of applications, a lot of people got in touch with them. They had an office which was basically a spare room in the small flat that they lived in. And they had two desks, okay, one would sit at one desk, one at the other. And they had a telephone. But in fact it was a toy telephone that they bought in the market for a couple of francs, with a wire coming out that went under the door, but it wasn't connected to anything. And when they had people in to be interviewed for the role, to be like proper producers, they would pick up the phone and pretend to have these conversations with people who were going to give them money to produce the film. But they had Ursula Pauli and they got these two other girls, neither of whom I think had ever done anything else. And I tried really hard to track down the cast, and it turned out to they've disappeared, or they don't want to be known, they've changed their names, whatever. The other guy, the main guy, the Arabic, the servant, is played by a guy called Ali Ben Ayed, and he was a big name in Tunisia at the time. I mean, he'd done like Shakespeare translated into Arabic, Camus stuff. He was a big deal. And he was in, I think, one of the Angelique films, Angelique and the Sultan, would it be? Which I think was filmed in North Africa. And kind of surprising that he agreed to be in this film, because when you see it, he's, some fairly unpleasant stuff in it, and he's mostly the centre of the unpleasantness. But, he read the script and he thought, hey, this is different, let's do it, have you got any money? And amazingly, they managed to get money from the Tunisian government at the time, who were wanting to promote art and culture and stuff. And there was a guy there, whose name, I can't remember his name, but he was a really, really brave guy who actually took a risk with these two unknown amateurs and gave them enough money to get started. And basically they used the money to buy film stock. And I think, if I remember correctly, they bought 4,000 metres of film stock. And I think that for a normal 90-minute feature, it's about 3,000 metres, 2,700, something like that. So they had almost no room for error. You know, like normally when you shoot a film, you shoot one scene, you do a take and you do another one, and it's not quite right, you do another one, and you do one for safety and so on. They couldn't do any of that. Everything had to be done more or less in one take. And you'll see this when you watch the film, if you watch it as many times as I have, that a lot of the shots, all of the cast are in the same shot at the same time. Because normally, you know, you would do something like, you know, shot, counter shot, shoot somebody, then shoot over somebody's shoulder, and, you know, you'd edit it together, but they couldn't afford to do that. So the film has this kind of, almost like a silent film kind of aesthetic, to one extent or another. That, you know, everybody's in the frame, and it's, you know, the camera moves around, but, you know, it follows the actors, that kind of thing. I don't know what else I can say, really. I don't want to give, you know, anything away, because it's a film that you want to discover. And I think that the interesting thing about it is that they wanted to make a film that made some kind of a statement about, you know, what life is like in Tunisia, post-colonial kind of stuff. But they also wanted to make something that was entertaining. So, you know, it's not just thrown at you and here's a piece of art, you've got to find a way to digest it. You know, they always tried to make sure that it moved, there was something entertaining in it, and something surprising. And I think you'll find when you watch it that it still works on that level at least. I don't think there's much more I can say at the moment. If I'm around later, if you've got any questions and I'm around, I'm happy to talk to you about it. But I think we should probably start the film and take it from there. Enjoy it.